With the success of one of my YouTube videos reacting to the new Smite reviews, came a lot of hate towards myself, HiRez, and Smite in general. It's important to understand where the rampant haters come from and why people love to hate HiRez. I mean, you can go under any HiRez Studios social post, be it Smitegame's Twitter, or YouTube, or anything like, or even the personal Twitters of HiRez employees, and see doomsayers calling for the failure of Smite, and so on. Here's where we deep dive into why people love to hate HiRez. I'm going to take you through a timeline of HiRez Studios' past games, how they failed, and what they succeeded at. Through this, we're going to analyze the state of Smite 2 and how HiRez might treat the Smite IP a little differently to their other previous failed ventures. HiRez started off with a pretty mid-game right out of the gate, and through this history, you may understand why people tend to have a bittersweet relationship with HiRez. Global Agenda released to a dedicated fanbase in February of 2010. It's a third-person shooter MMO hybrid with an emphasis on 3D movement like using a jetpack to fly around. The time to kill was long, so it seemed to have emphasis on positioning rather than quick kills. Honestly, looking at the footage, the game seemed a little bit ahead of its time and extremely ambitious. Even now you can see their focus on MOBA-like mechanics, with different roles such as snipers, healers, and abilities to put up barriers and so on. It was a very chaotic game that can't help you feel a little bit nostalgic towards it even if you didn't play it. With multiple distinct game modes, there was no shortage of variety for gamers to play, but that was a huge part of the issue. They spread themselves far too thin right out of the gate, and the huge amount of game modes spreading players apart, and the MMO features were seldom relevant to the game, echoing a sort of MMO light feel instead of a true MMO. You can really see the bones of HiRez as a studio with this game, and many of their future games having some nostalgic echoes of Global Agenda even to this day. However, the game seemingly struggled with player bases, releasing to free-to-play only a year later in 2011, but was eventually shut down in 2018 with a, I guess, sorrowful exit tweet by Todd? It seems that the Global Agenda page is still available on Steam, kind of, but it's delisted. You have to sort of go directly to it. It's weird. And the servers apparently went back up in 2022 with no announcement from HiRez, but Steam numbers are non-existent, and I don't even know if there's a dedicated community left to enjoy this middling classic. This being said, Global Agenda was supported for many years, a strong 8 years of a live service. If anything, I think Global Agenda can show that HiRez, when they really believe in a title, can be rather tenacious when it comes to their game, trying as many things as possible to make things stick. That being said, HiRez did also entirely stop developing the game without so much of a post on social media that I can tell, putting the game eternally on life support until its cancellation. It's a weird move, fighting tooth and nail to try and make a game work, before just suddenly putting it into purgatory with everyone wondering where the new content was. It was a weird move, and I'm sure gamers at the time were put on edge, cautious to their next developments. Taking their learnings from Global Agenda, that a more focused, free-to-play game was more of a appropriate goal, they created their first beloved classic, Tribes Ascend. From a perspective of a Smite player, Tribes Ascend was the first real look at the HiRez formula, a focused, non-pay-to-win, free-to-play game with emphasis on fun gameplay first. In the beta, HiRez even took community feedback, essentially overhauling most of the systems in the game from the get-go. Sounds familiar? The game was a huge success right out of the gate. Critically loved and enjoyed by fans all the same. It nearly reached 1 million registered players. Even though the game was free-to-play friendly, you could argue that some loose pay-to-win mechanics were implied, even though everything was technically earnable. Players lamented that the grind to get new classes or weapons could take tens of hours to just get only one of them, which was a huge pain point going forward. There's a large amount of nuanced and interesting conversations surrounding Tribes Ascend. While the game played amazingly, the grind was immense, and from what I understood, the history of this nuanced scene, previous Tribes games were always supported by a whole lot of modding support. HiRez was not about that, not allowing mod support or private service for the game, which was the antithesis of the Tribes IP. They did keep updating the game for a while, but their priorities slowly shifted, eventually culminating in announcing that Tribes Ascend would not get any further updates for 6 months, so that they could focus on their massively growing game, Smite. Well, this killed Tribes Ascend. No updates and a frustrated player base left the game abandoned, and HiRez had killed and moved on to another project. This is all to say, Smite was doing extremely well. It had eclipsed Tribes Ascend's registered players numbers with ease, massively overtaking the entire company in a shift that they probably didn't see coming until the game exploded onto the scene. Upon the official release, Smite easily had over 3 million registered users. Smite going forward was the face of the company, leaving Tribes Ascend to be abandoned until further notice. The game did receive an update and change or so on going forward, but nothing that mixed major issues with the game, leaving it to purgatory. So here's where I came in. When I was young, Smite instantly captured my heart. I was fresh off of reading the Percy Jackson series. My late father, who I'll never forget, had bought me the full book set for Christmas. I was elated with it. We were so poor, and the book set costed upwards of $150, I believe, which was like $1 million to me, someone who got a $2 allowance a week to save up. This filled my head with stories of myths and monsters, gods and titans. When Smite came in and swooped me up and captured my obsession with ease. It was everything you could ask for in a game. Competitive, with a wonderful art style that told you everything about the game, the mythological themes shown in every inch of the map design, the passion was palpable, the game soared to heights never before seen by HiRez Studios. This all came to a fever pitch when in Season 2, Smite hit 10 million registered players. The game was everywhere, you couldn't escape it. Well, at least for me. Listen, there is 1,000 things you can say about Smite, and if I talk through the 10-year-long and ongoing history of Smite 1, we'd be here for 6 hours. To very incredibly simplify the long history of Smite, it was basically what enabled HiRez to explore many options in the future. The game was their first massively profitable game, and leveraging that profit, they used it to launch many failed and some mildly successful titles, which we'll go over shortly. Smite, according to the community, has been dying since launch, but Smite has never truly died. It had some rocky moments, but the core passionate player base has always existed. Through the massive UI downgrade, IMO, the horrible monetization overhaul, and the dark ages where the developers were making random game modes like Smite Car and Trials of King Hercules, which, in their own right, were amazing, but took away developer time from addressing core issues that plagued Smite at the time. As the years went on, the aging engine took hold, preventing many major bugs from ever being fixed. And as more and more content filled the game, the more spaghettified the code became. Rumblings of the community wanting and asking for a sequel to Smite, to update the engine, to make it new and fresh again, began to happen even while I was still young in the early seasons. It has been a long time coming, the core community waiting and waiting for something that seemingly never came until, well, later in this video, of course. During the reign of Smite, HiRez used their massive profits to make the company go wide rather than exclusively focus on Smite, once Smite had settled into the massive success it was. Well, they wanted that mobile gaming market money as well. Jetpack Fighter, not to be confused with the massively successful Jetpack Joyride, launched in 2016, 2 years after the official launch of Smite. I actually played this on launch, and as they added the Leona JPF skin for Nemesis and Smite, I wanted it a lot. It was a swipe-based action mobile game where you chaotically swiped forward through various levels, avoiding and destroying enemies, traps, barriers, and so on. With several boss fights and many levels, it was actually a pretty reasonably well-made mobile game. It had some content, but really, I only played it until I got the Nemesis skin, as I imagined thousands of others did. I don't really remember a reason to spend money on the game, as it wasn't something that you really needed money to win with, if I remember correctly. In classic HiRez fashion, the game wasn't an instant success, so they left it to die with a lack of content and updates, eventually being removed from the App Store sometime around 2019. I mean, this game was a super weird move from HiRez, releasing a random mobile game for their core audience of PC gamers ever since their inception. I don't really have a whole lot to say about it. It was mostly an empty calorie experience, and while it was flashy and fun for a few hours, it didn't really provide the depth or intrigue you'd want from a game to keep you coming back. However, something far more interesting also released in alpha in 2016. Releasing into Steam Early Access, Paladins was an immediate smash hit, and came to the market at a perfect time. Overwatch came out around the same time, a little bit after Paladins, and while Overwatch was the massively far more successful game, Paladins was a respectable force in the hero shooter genre. It featured incredibly charming hero design, and a simplistic TF2-style gameplay that simply could not fail. The early alpha was rough, the game modes not being very well refined, but the core gameplay was amazing. The game was the first game where I ever actively attempted to go professionally in. Unfortunately, being incredibly poor and unable to have a computer capable of running the game at a consistent at 60 FPS, I wasn't able to achieve it, even if I hit incredibly high ranks with great in-game performance, even playing on several teams as we try to push our way into the competitive scene. Paladins felt like a true attempt at a real game by HiRez, and like Smite, it had a ton of eyes on it. However, after a huge initial success, the game began to dwindle. Updates and communication had slowed down, and a horrible decision was made. They made Paladins pay to win. This demolished the community. Everyone I found myself playing with, day in and day out, instantly quit the game, and of course, so did I. After the massive backlash and a huge drop in player numbers, they did eventually revert the update, but many players' trust was dashed, and losing a massive chunk of players who simply never returned. Paladins is still frequently played by many people to this day, even if it's seemingly in a bit of a limbo. It has a very small team who still releases updates for it, but the game was absolutely taken a backseat due to the layoffs and the refocus of the company entirely into Smite 2. Maybe by some miracle, Paladins 2 could be on the horizon someday. That being said, Paladins is still supported to this day with a large community, and HiRez stuck with it, even after disastrous pay-to-win scandal. Smite Rivals came out in 2017, and I really don't have much I need to say about it. It was a blatant Clash Royale ripoff with some actually really stunning anime-inspired Smite art, but ultimately it was just a ripoff, a mobile game ripoff. This was a depressing move. The gameplay was good enough as a mobile game, but it was a game everyone had already played before, and after not retaining much of a player base, they canned it shortly after in the same year, never even surviving into 2018. I think HiRez might have a mobile issue, hey? This next game is incredibly bittersweet to me, as I was an avid supporter, even sinking money into it during the early alpha stage of the game, something I'd never do with another HiRez title until Smite 2. Hand of the Gods, Smite Tactics was a perfectly crafted combination of Duelist, a tile-based board game / card game combo with Hearthstone, a game which needs no introduction. This was a fusion of some of my favorite strategy games. I'd been playing Hearthstone since launch alongside Smite, so when I saw that my, at the time, favorite company was making a game with my, at that time, favorite IP in my, still to this day, favorite genre, I nearly soiled my pants. The gameplay of Smite Tactics was something to die for. A complex strategy game that not only valued good deck building, not only valued strategic gameplay, but also valued positioning on the board in a way that stimulated my strategy gamer brain in all the right places. Utilizing different gods as heroes that defined your hero power or ability, and Pantheon, basically a Hearthstone class, you'd build distinct decks using, for example, a combination of Egyptian cards and neutral monster cards. I fondly remember using Ao Kuang, who, if I remember correctly, reduced the cost of spells in your hand while he was on the board alongside Nu Wa, whose hero power added a spell that dealt 1 damage to anything for 1 mana. You'd build your combo, stacking these spells in your hand before eventually dropping Ao Kuang and dumping damage into your opponents to OTK them. It was amazing. Unfortunately, this game was unable to amass a following from the Smite community, which breaks my heart. I'd like to think that if it released today, it'd be able to see at least a small dedicated player base. I still have the original installation of Hand of the Gods backed up to my drive, holding on to that hope somehow that some way, HiRez brings it back. In typical HiRez fashion, they left the servers running for a while, waiting for the final few players to give up, only to delete it and never look back. This actually hurt me, and it brought me on the side of the HiRez haters. I still loved Smite, and the game was still so fun and ingrained in my friend group deeply, but I never trusted HiRez with an alpha title again, until Smite 2. Paladins Strike released in 2018, and was honestly an impressively developed mobile game, faithfully adapting the Paladins gameplay to the mobile platform into a top-down hero shooter. It was fresh and kind of unique, and only a few Chinese games like Mobile Legends Bang Bang, or whatever they call it now, emulated the same MOBA-like energy of Paladins on mobile. My friends and I actually grinded this game to quite a high rank during the beta, and we played a lot of it. Unfortunately, the game heavily featured pay-to-win mechanics, and was quickly abandoned when it didn't garner an audience worth HiRez's attention. So, in typical HiRez fashion, it was cancelled. This following game is another one I am incredibly salty about. Realm Royale was a spin-off of a game mode that was briefly playable in Paladins, a battle royale made inside of Paladins for some strange reason. It was an odd era for HiRez, making entire minigames within their own games. However, Realm Royale released to good reception. I remember it clearly. The gunplay was fantastic. It felt like Paladins, while the gameplay of a battle royale at a time was still relatively fresh and engaging. The forging system was what I loved the most. In order to get the best guns, armor, and abilities, you had to forge them at forges dotted around the map. You got points by looting, killing, and disenchanting gear you didn't want. Then, you could spend those points to forge, which it took time to forge, all the while the forge was spewing black smoke high into the sky that all players could see. It was basically announcing that you were there creating tense situations every game where you were defending the forge so they couldn't steal your items that you were crafting. It was honestly genius. Everything about it just worked, and one fateful day, Ninja, the, famous Fortnite streamer, or ex-famous, I don't know, streamed the game at the height of its popularity, bringing millions of eyes and players into the game. It was a smashing success, but surprisingly, they somehow fumbled the bag. After countless updates, reworking perfectly designed and beloved core game mechanics, the game became a horrid shell of its former self. This one baffles me because the game was honestly a fantastic little battle royale, but HiRez continued to shoot themselves in the foot, frustratingly, again and again with this game. Realm Royale isn't a story of a dwindling player base as a result of a lack of support from the devs, but honestly, clueless leadership who fundamentally didn't understand why the game was fun and successful to begin with. A baffling and unique story that could be an entire video of its own. Let me know if you want a breakdown of Realm Royale's short history. And honestly, going off script a little bit with this game, I cannot explain why it was so fun. Like, it was an amazing game, and everything about it was just perfect. And it's criminal that they changed everything. Honestly, I felt like I was getting spit in the face by HiRez. But anyways, on to the next one. In 2019, HiRez released Smite Blitz. I remember playing this game for exactly 5 minutes and uninstalling it. Though it featured beautiful Smite artwork, The game was a horrible gacha game. By far the worst, most anti-consumer genre ever made. Filled with predatory anti-player mechanics and the laundry list of manipulative business tactics you see in every gacha game, it launched to a resounding flop. And to this day, the last mobile game HiRez has ever had its hand in. The game sucked hard. I mean, you make a gacha game, it's gonna suck. I mean, it is what it is. The game lasted only a year before it was shut down. In 2020, Rogue Company launched. It's hard to tell what this game was even trying to be, if anything. It's a free-to-play third-person shooter and basically describes all the game is. You pick a rogue, which is their term for character, god, operator, whatever. You've seen it all before. Each rogue has a unique gameplay attached, be it with a type of weapon or abilities, yada yada, and you go in and fight in certain game modes. Honestly, this game is so uninspired that I don't even really want to write about it. I think my friends and I played maybe 10 or 15 games of this before deciding it wasn't really worth it. There's so many other better shooters out there, including Paladins, that it's really a nothing burger game, in my opinion, and well, the game still has a small player base of sorts, and it occasionally receives updates. This game seems to mostly be on life support, and is likely going to close in the future. Also in 2020, HiRez released Prophecy, not to be confused with the offshoot sub-company of HiRez that later became its own company after splitting from HiRez. Anyways, Prophecy was your average auto-battler in the Smite IP, and they were basically just chasing trends, not tracing chens. Oh my god. It was honestly incredibly well developed for an auto-battler pasted together with previous Smite assets in a couple months. The game functioned well, it was clean, and it was rather fun as far as auto-battlers go, but the game was abandoned only a month after beta testers got their hands on it. Didn't even get released. In 2022, HiRez hadn't released many games for a while, so it was a surprise to everyone when they suddenly announced Divine Knockout. Divine Knockout is like Smash Bros, but if they made it a 3D arena that you can fight in with teams of 1, 2, or 3. This was based on the Smite IP, but every character was, like, chibi-fied. This made it super weird, but it was fun, it had a high skill cap, but it was definitely missing something. I couldn't really tell you what, but I wasn't compelled to play it much, and I think many others felt the same. The game was tried by many, and initially had a lot of player interest, but that quickly fell off as the game slowly dwindled out. While the game is still technically playable to this day, HiRez has fully abandoned Divine Knockout in pursuit of Smite 2. Finally, here we are. Smite 2. In 2024, Smite 2 launched into early alpha. Initially only weekend tests every couple of weeks or months or so. I can't really remember now. But eventually it launched into 24/7 alpha to relatively large interest. However, the game wasn't like Smite enough, and it really showed. The game had a large initial reception, but very quickly dwindled as the cracks began to show. The game looked like a generic Unreal Engine 5 project with no matchmaking, difficulty for readability, among thousands of other issues. However, Smite 2 has been turned around by the tenacity of the developers at HiRez, even if the game launched far too early on in its development. Honestly, Intersect has a fantastic video on everything that has changed from the launch of Smite 2, and it really shows the passion and dedication these devs have for Smite 2. I would recommend checking out this video after this one. Looking back at HiRez's track record, it's really easy to see where the animosity comes from, but you can also see where dedicated fans have come from. HiRez developers are talented, passionate people who give their all into every game they make, and it seems they're often at the whims of their otherwise flimsy and unsure management. However, with the threat to their main IP, the thing that made HiRez who they are, they've doubled down their efforts, laying off all superfluous staff and locked into the development of Smite 2. Looking at their history, it's filled with a wide array of blunders, failed projects, and questionable decisions, but it also shows a history of tenacity, creativity, and genuine excitement for their games. At this point, you simply have a choice. Do you put your trust in the developers to make Smite 2 all that it should be, or do you click onto the past, commit to cynicism, don't believe the statements of the developers, the 3 times weekly developer Q&As, and the healing player base and perception of Smite 2? As someone who has been part of HiRez's history for over 10 years now, and who has seen the wins and many fails, and have interacted with and watched the developers' passion throughout the years, I choose to believe that they will make Smite 2 all it's supposed to be, and I choose to believe that Smite 2 will become the success it deserves to be. Please, share your opinion about Smite 2. Talk about what you enjoy, what annoyed you, how bad that person was who beat you in lane. Though they're still bad, even though they beat you, a good player. Share your passion for the game, make noise, and create the future you want. It's not good to shut down all criticism and be blindly positive, but it's also not good to be universally negative and cynical and ignore everything good that has happened. Take the good and the bad in stride. Let's form a game we want to play for another 10 years. Thanks for watching. If you want more content like this, please comment and let me know. This is mostly just a very surface level approach for every one of these games, but if you want me to go in depth with each one of these games, what they succeeded at, what they failed at, how they failed, and so on, let me know. I'd love to continue making video essays, improve at what I'm doing, and overall become a better content creator. You guys have been great, and the support has been overwhelming. Thank you so much and have a great day. Please subscribe, and of course, comment and take care.